What's up, guys? It's Toad back with you. Better off dead. Monday morning, 2-2. Day yesterday, I was 2-1 in the NFL, and it would have been a winning day if I got the Houston Texans money line cash. So that would have given me a slight win because I would have had two underdog money line cashes in the NFL, and instead, I only get one of the two, and that gives me a losing day instead of a winning day because I lost the Oklahoma City Thunder. Fuck them, obviously. I mean, the market on that game continued to be indicating on the Thunder, by the way. And the Thunder moved up to 6.5. They had a good first quarter and then a couple of horrific quarters where they just completely put themselves out of the game. I don't know what happened in that game. I do know I think Golden State shot like an absurdly high percentage in that game, but still, I'd have to go back and even look. I don't even know if I want to look. But whatever the case was there, that was not good, obviously, for me. And the Thunder tried to make a comeback in the fourth quarter, and obviously it fell short. And obviously at that point they weren't going to cover the number. They did get to back within 6, but I needed them to win by at least 6. So, and then obviously the Lions one was the hardest one to take because I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is going to be a money line cash, and I'm going to wind up with a slight win on the day. They're winning 23-7. Excuse me, the Texans versus the Lions. They're winning 23-7 at halftime. So I'm like, this is in the bag. They won the game. It's over. This game's going Houston's way. Jared Goff did throw 5 interceptions in the game, which is very unlike him because he's been very, very good at completing his passes to his receivers this year. But the game completely turned around in the second half. Dan Campbell, good with halftime adjustments, man. He is a very good coach, and Houston completely blew it. But then there were a couple of plays that just also kind of determined what happened in that game where C.J. Stroud there was one play where the protection broke down. He was running around. He might have been able to at least escape or maybe get the ball, like just throw it away or something like that. And one of his own linemen ran into him and caused him to fumble the ball. And I think Detroit recovered that. Or maybe Detroit didn't recover that, but it was like a loss of huge yardage and ended the drive, whatever it was. That was ridiculous that Stroud's own lineman ran into him on that play. And then if you guys were watching the end of it, Houston was basically like 10 yards or so away from being in range to kick a game-winning field goal in, of course, a roofed stadium in Houston with Fairbairn, who's one of the better kickers in the NFL. And on a third down play, blatant PI on the Detroit defender there. Passes over the middle, and the defender just runs the receiver over completely before the ball even gets there. Absolutely PI. And it doesn't get called because the NFL is rigged. So then what happens? Houston, for some reason, decides to attempt the 58-yard field goal, even though I think they should have punted and played the field position game at that point. I think at that point, Houston had all of their timeouts left too, so why wouldn't you punt it down, try to hold Detroit's offense in check down there? Your defense has been playing pretty well in the game. Do that and then get the ball back with good field position. No, they tried to kick the field goal. The distance was there, but it was way wide. So then you just hand Detroit the ball like 20 yards away from being in field goal range, and of course, that's what happened. Although Detroit almost didn't get a first down and wound up not being able to get the field goal. But of course, then they do. They get a pass to St. Brown. They convert, and then the game's over. They're going to be able to kick a field goal, even though it is with a new kicker there for Detroit, Bates. He's new to the NFL, but still, just a disgusting way to lose that. The Texans still covered the spread for me, but that money line losing that money line cash, not getting it, and having that swing the day from a slight win to a slight loss pissed me off. Let's look at today's card, man. We got a lot of college basketball for a Monday. Mondays are usually light in college basketball, but I guess not early in the season. We do have some interesting games here. I'm going to try to point out some games real quickly that I'm not actually playing. Ohio State is coming off a big game where they beat Texas. I mean, Ohio State, definitely a competitive team. They've been kind of under the radar the last couple of years as they haven't really been up in the rankings. They haven't been one of those like top teams, but they've been kind of around the tournament, like either getting into the tournament barely or just missing the tournament. They've been like a tournament bubble team. They're not a bad team, and they won this game against Texas as, I think, a 3-point underdog maybe. Is that what it was? Something like that. Actually, Texas was down to 1.5 when the game went off. But still, it's a nice win for Ohio State against a ranked Texas team. Now they get a game against Youngstown State, who, of course, Youngstown State is probably going to treat this game more importantly because it is a little big brother scenario there. Youngstown is a little brother in the state of Ohio to Ohio State. So Youngstown is probably going to have more focus on this game than Ohio State. Well, Ohio State has a ranked team up next with Texas A&M. Texas A&M has climbed up the KenPom rankings, man. Even though they were ranked like 18 to start out the season. No, I think they were ranked around 13, right? Because they actually lost to UCF, and Texas A&M is still not dropping in the rankings. So I guess it's because the rankings come out weekly, maybe. So maybe it just hasn't happened yet. But KenPom had Texas A&M at like 60 to start the season. Now he has them at like 18. So Texas A&M somehow, despite losing to UCF, has moved way up in his rankings. There's a lot of shuffling around going on early in the season, man, when you're trying to figure out who these teams are. But Ohio State has Texas A&M up next, which is a ranked road matchup against Texas A&M there. Ranked road opponent, or a ranked opponent for Ohio State. They're going to have to play on the road, I should say. So this does kind of look like a sandwich spot to me. So I would lean to Youngstown State. It's not making my card. And Youngstown, they had a game postponed against Westminster, Pennsylvania for whatever reason. They started their season a little bit late against Chicago State, and they won easily. And that was a game I think I mentioned on my show. And if I didn't, I forgot to, because that was a spot where Chicago State was in a bad spot. And that one, they were coming off a big performance against Loyola Chicago, where they fell just short against one of their in-city bigger brothers. And Youngstown State took advantage of that bad spot and beat Chicago State. But Youngstown State's the better of those two teams anyway. Youngstown looking probably like they're, again, one of the better teams in the horizon, which they have been the last couple of years. Will they be able to compete with Ohio State is a different question. But the spot sets up decently for Youngstown State, in my opinion. Ohio State is up from 17.5 to 18 with juice, though. So it is moving up on Ohio State. And I believe KenPom has this number like right around the 17 range. But the lean would be to Youngstown State, just because of the situation. I think Ohio State could potentially overlook Youngstown with that game being surrounded by better opponents. McNeese is playing against Alabama, and I was looking at McNeese, and they lost their season opener as a 10.5 point favorite against South Dakota State. So I was thinking, McNeese is going to be in a bounce back spot here. But they kind of already had their bounce back, playing a nice, easy tune-up game against Biblical Stud. It's the College of Jesus, man. He's the stud of the Bible. The Biblical Studs. I'm assuming it's the College of Biblical Studies or something like that. I have no idea what that is. But it's when you have a dude who's so handsome looking, man, and so virile that it's biblical. He's the Biblical Stud. So huge win for McNeese, obviously, beating the Biblical Stud, blowing him out, obviously, blowing them out. So that game being in the mix doesn't really make me want to really look at this game and take McNeese. Alabama maybe slightly overrated at number 2. I think KenPom does have them somewhere in the top 10. Alabama is actually coming off a game where they didn't really play well against Arkansas State. Alabama, this game was way too close with Alabama. That game was tied after it looked like Alabama was running away with it. They probably just took their foot off the gas, and Arkansas State shocked them and came all the way back and actually tied it. And then Alabama looks like they realized what was going on, and they turned it on and finished them off. But Alabama did also shoot terribly from three-point range in that game, 19.4%. So probably not really a sustainable three-point percentage, which is really low, but still Alabama's a 24.5 point favorite. Got kind of scared in that game. They took a scare, so that would actually be reason for Alabama to maybe focus in this game. But then Alabama does have Purdue up in a couple of days, so that's a matchup of two Final Four teams from last year who didn't meet up against each other in the Final Four. But that is a big game against Purdue, even though Zach Edey is gone. Purdue, I think, did have some young guards there that probably returned for Purdue, so I could see arguments going in both directions in this game. So I just figured I'd talk about it because it's a situation with some interest there. And then I don't know what else I was going to talk about. St. Peter's against Rutgers. I mean, St. Peter's is a little brother in the state of New Jersey here against Rutgers. As a little brother in New Jersey, St. Peter's almost pulled off a big double-digit upset at Seton Hall. So St. Peter's, I thought, was in a bad spot coming out of that, and they lost but actually covered, I think, at UMass Lowell. That was a game I mentioned on my show, and I told you UMass Lowell, they struggle offensively, man, so I wasn't really confident in laying a huge number with UMass Lowell, and UMass Lowell almost covered but did not. So St. Peter's is now coming off that, but they're playing a third straight road game to open the season now, but debatably they will still show up focused here, even though they might run out of steam here. But with Rutgers being maybe the biggest brother in the state of New Jersey right now, maybe they will show up for this because Rutgers is ranked right now. Rutgers looking like a pretty decent basketball team coming into this season, but Rutgers only has one game under their belt so far against Wagner, so there's not a whole lot you can gain from that other than the fact that Wagner is one of the better NEC teams, I guess. They won the conference last year, but it was in an upset over a Merrimack team that just couldn't shoot at all down the stretch there. Merrimack was probably the better of those two teams, though. But I'm not going to play this game, just pointing it out because it's one of the more interesting situations. Rutgers sitting at a 16-point favorite. It does look like the percentage of tickets is coming in on the Rutgers side right now based on where I see this red, even though pregame doesn't have any percentage listed yet. And cash percentage looks like it may be on the St. Peter's side early, but not playing the game. And then I was going to mention Yale. Or actually, I guess I'll mention Butler, too, because I'm going to be playing a game in the other side of this matchup. But Butler hasn't looked good to start the season, man. And Missouri State almost caught them as a 16.5-point underdog, and that did not refocus Butler in the next game. And Butler did get caught in the next game as a 17.5-point underdog, losing to Austin Peay. I don't really understand it, man. Although Butler with a ton of turnovers in that game, 16 turnovers at home. It's not something you typically see with only 8 on the other side. Usually the home team tends to have the turnover advantage and is able to dictate the pace, which something I'll talk about when I get to the Austin Peay game. Butler does play kind of a slow-paced game there to some extent, I think, and isn't really that great offensively. So Butler, I don't know what's going on with Butler, but if they're going to get right here, and so we have two things could be the case, right? Like maybe Butler just really isn't that good, although Ken Baum already has them down in the 100 range, so he has them not really very good anyway, but still the odds makers are kind of in line with what Ken Baum has, so they're still lining Butler as a big favorite in all these games. So either Butler is really not close to as good as we even think that they are, even though we don't even think they're that good, or they're going to finally show up focused for a game after losing a game that they shouldn't have lost to Austin Peay. So maybe that'll be the case. I mean, if they keep the turnovers in check, they should be able to win a game like this against Western Michigan. Butler's up from 15.5 to 16.5. I don't know what Ken Baum's number is on this, but it looks like it's a decent spot for Butler to refocus and bounce back from that ugly loss. So that would be what I would look towards in this game. Western Michigan only has one win so far, and it's against a non-Division I team in Davenport. So nothing you could really gather from that other than at least it gave them a win on the season after they opened with a loss to Coastal Carolina, who I don't think is a particularly great Division I team, but Coastal Carolina was the home favorite there and won the game pretty easily. So take from that what you will, I guess. So I don't know what else to say about that game, but the lean would be to Butler to bounce back in that one. And then Yale I was going to mention because Yale is coming off a game where they lost to Illinois Chicago pretty badly. That's not a game that Yale should be losing, man. Illinois Chicago's been one of the worst teams in the Horizon for who knows how long. Or actually, they're in the MVC now, excuse me. They were in the Horizon until last year, I think. Now they're in the Missouri Valley. But still, I don't think UIC is a very good team at all. Yale losing that game doesn't look that great, man. And they were down the whole game, basically, and kind of got destroyed. And Yale is one of the better teams in the Ivy, at least we think. Still, but this was also a game where Yale was on the wrong end of a pretty major turnover discrepancy there. Not good for Yale, even though Yale shot pretty well in the game. Yale was a 6.5-point favorite on the road in that one and lost. So it could be a bounce-back spot for Yale, and they may show up focus against Purdue, who has a much bigger game up next against Alabama, and then Marquette after that. So it could potentially be a look ahead for Purdue there. Purdue's down from 17 to 16.5, so I would look to maybe take the points with Yale in that one, but that's just a quick situational read. I'm giving away some quick situational reads here. And let's get to my actual plays, and then I'll move over to the other sports before I get out of here, because I still got a lot to do. Florida minus 23.5 at college basketball is the first one up. This line, I believe, has gone up a little bit from 22 to 23.5. This is against Grambling State, who Grambling State, you don't think of them as a basketball team at all. You think of them as a football team more so, even though they're in FCS football, I think. But basketball, I mean, at the very least, they won their horrible conference last year in the SWAC or whatever it is, and they made the tournament last year, I'm pretty sure, Grambling. So they're not a horrible basketball team. And Grambling is coming off a game where they beat Ole Miss on the road. Or, excuse me, they didn't beat them. They lost by 2. What am I saying? They almost beat Ole Miss on the road. They lost by 2, and they're winning the game throughout the first half. Grambling was winning by double digits in this game, and then Ole Miss finally was able to turn it on, and the game was close down the stretch, and Ole Miss was able to get back there and hold them off. This was a bad shooting performance from Ole Miss, though. 35.4% from the floor, 23.1 from 3. That's a major outlier of percentages there, man. Like, that's not sustainable. Grambling shooting 46.7% from the field. I mean, okay, a little bit high, but 47.4 from 3. That's probably not going to happen again either. Grambling shooting out of their minds from 3. So I expect a regression after that huge game from Grambling. And Grambling was on the wrong end of the turnover battle, 22-6. So I don't know how Ole Miss didn't win this game by more, even despite the shooting percentages being the way they were. When you have a turnover disparity of minus 16, you don't stay in a game like that. So I don't know how that happened. Ole Miss was a 23.5-point favorite in that game, and Grambling almost beat them. Now Grambling has to face a second straight road game, and this is going to be a little bit different in my opinion, because the one big difference between Ole Miss and Florida, even though I think Florida is the better of the two teams, is that Ole Miss plays a really slow pace, so I think that allowed Grambling to kind of stay in that game and hang around. Florida is completely different. Florida is a fast team. Florida goes up-tempo, man. Grambling is a team that wants to play really slow, and usually the home team, especially if they're the way, way better team like Florida is, they can dictate the pace, and I expect that to be the case with Florida here. I think Florida is going to be able to run up and down the court in this one and speed up the game, throw Grambling out of their element, and I think Florida will be able to win this game by a big margin, hopefully, obviously, because I'm laying Florida, but that's the big difference between this Ole Miss game and the Florida game, and I think Grambling, they may wind up turning the ball over again a lot in this game, because it'll be a game that throws them out of the pace that they want to actually be playing in, and they're in, I think, a big hangover spot after that huge effort against Ole Miss. When you're a team like Grambling, you're not really able to sustain a max effort like that against two teams in back-to-back games on the road that are way better than you. And this is going to be an up-tempo game if Florida has anything to say about it, whereas Ole Miss doesn't play that style. So I like Florida in that one. And as far as Florida's schedule, which I just had up, I think, or maybe I didn't, Florida's got 2 games under their belt already, and they just kind of have momentum right now. Like, are you going to argue they're going to be looking ahead to this rivalry against Florida State? Maybe, but I think that game means more to Florida State right now, because Florida's been the better of those two teams recently. So we'll see what happens there. And then Florida does have this coaching issue, I guess, which you got to take that into account, I guess, which Todd Golden is subject to an inquiry. I don't even know what that means. I don't know what they're even talking about. I don't know. I guess the university is investigating allegations of sexual harassment. But yeah, we know what this Title IX stuff does, man. Like, we don't even know if there's any merit to any of this. This could just be a Duke lacrosse thing again. Like, who even knows what's going on with that? But it looks like he's still going to coach this game. So it looks like it shouldn't affect them. And maybe it'll actually, like, you could argue it'll be a distraction, but I think it might just make Florida want to focus on basketball here and just ignore that stuff. So they don't even want to pay attention to what's going on there. So even though, yes, it might be a little bit of a distraction, I'm still going to roll with Florida in this one. Ken Palm only has this line at about 20, but I think the spot dictates that Florida's already won a couple of games against lesser Florida opponents, so they're just kind of going with momentum right now. So the play would be Florida there, and then the other play I have is Chattanooga -2.5 as a road favorite in this one. It looks like their line has gone down a little bit on them, though. Actually, it's down from 2.5 to 2 with juice. So it looks like there may be some money coming in against this, and I wouldn't agree with it. I mean, maybe you'll be able to lay 2 on Chattanooga if it gets to that. And pregame isn't even spelling Chattanooga right, so way to go. This is against that Austin Peay team, and I told you what's going on with Austin Peay, man. Austin Peay, I mean, they are a team that just upset Butler, man. Butler hasn't looked good in either game this season, so I don't know really what you can take away from that. That was a big upset for Austin Peay, man. When you're a lesser team like that out of the A-Sun, which I think Austin Peay was in the Ohio Valley for a while. Now they're in the A-Sun. That's a big win for them. They went on the road and beat Butler. Even though Chattanooga, you could consider Chattanooga to be a bigger brother than Austin Peay in the state of Tennessee. I mean, they're both kind of little brothers. They're siblings in the state of Tennessee, I would say more so. You know who the big brother is. And, oh, yeah, guess what? That's who Austin Peay plays next, Tennessee, in 6 days. So this looks like a little bit of a sandwich spot, man, with Austin Peay having pulled off that huge upset over Butler. And Austin Peay taking advantage of a lot of Butler turnovers. And maybe the turnover disparity won't be as much because even though Austin Peay will be playing at home here, and they're a team that doesn't turn the ball over that much, it appears, still, I don't know if the turnover disparity is going to be as significant as it was in this game against Butler. Butler is also a team that is really challenged offensively, and Chattanooga actually has a better offense than Butler. Even though Chattanooga's defense sucks, Austin Peay is like a slow-paced team that isn't a very good offense, so Chattanooga has the way better offense of the two teams. So I think that might be the difference maker in this game. Chattanooga, like I said, they're a better offense than Butler, too. So they might be able to score up against this Austin Peay team. Austin Peay maybe in a pretty big letdown spot, in my opinion. And this also is one of those misleading types of lines because people are going to look at this and think, wait a minute, how is Chattanooga a road favorite as an 0-2 team against a 2-0 Austin Peay team? Well, that's because Chattanooga's a team that's actually the better team. They're in the better conference, and they've played USC and St. Mary's so far, both on the road. So Chattanooga has played two good teams so far, and yeah, they lost both games, and what can you do? They're both on the road, so that at least means Chattanooga is battle-tested early on, man. I mean, they've had a pretty difficult schedule, especially for a team that's in the SoCon, playing a Big Ten team now in USC. Is that where they are now? It's so weird to think of them as a Big Ten team. And then St. Mary's, who I think is still in the WCC, which I think Gonzaga will be leaving after this year or something like that. Yes, it is a third straight road game for Chattanooga, but it's the end of the road trip for them. They were out on the Pacific Coast, which is just not easy. I think now that they're back in their home environment, I think they're going to be better off in this game, man. So I like Chattanooga on this one. They're back at least in their home state of Tennessee, I should say, and they're playing a much more beatable opponent in Austin Peay, and they see what Austin Peay just did to Butler. So Chattanooga, even though, yes, they played tough against St. Mary's into the second half in this game, the game was actually close kind of earlier in the second half. They faded in the game, so I would consider that to be a pretty big effort game, but not a game where they were sustaining a max effort for the whole game because they were down double digits with about 10 minutes left or 8 minutes left in the game. So they were kind of able to pack it in a little bit, whereas Austin Peay put up a full max effort to pull off that upset against Butler. So I like Chattanooga in that game. Ken I think has that line around 2, so kind of right around where the number is on the board there. Now we go to NBA. Let's try to get this done quick. I'm not going to talk about any of the NBA games that I'm not playing because there are hardly any games here. The only games that I consider to be worth talking about, I think, are the games that I'm on. Well, actually, Oklahoma City and the Clippers, I would agree with taking the points with the Clippers in this one. That's not one of my plays, but the Thunder are down from 9.5 to 7, so some significant line movement coming in on the side of the Clippers there. Tickets evenly split 50-50. 81% of the cash on the side of the Clippers. We know what Oklahoma City did yesterday, losing for me, but they're coming off a huge game yesterday against Golden State, and now they're having to come off that game on a back-to-back. I mean, this is not a good spot for Oklahoma City, so I'll just point that out. Back-to-back, a third game in 4 days, although at least for them it's all at home. It's a fourth game in 6 days, with one game being on the road in Denver, but so the travel spot isn't that bad. But when they just played Golden State yesterday, a big step-up game, they could be in a hangover spot. That's a type of game that could hang you over. Clippers have a day rest here. They played when I played against them on Saturday, and they almost lost to the Toronto Raptors, man. So, or at least it was a game they could have potentially lost, even though they were leading most of the game. But still, that was kind of a close call for the Clippers. Now they're getting out of home after a lackluster performance, getting to start a road trip. So it is a much more positive spot for the Clippers in that one. The games I'm actually playing, the market looks like it's shifted to go against them. I'm still going to do it. One game is the New Orleans Pelicans +2. I think I'm at least going on, or this market does look like it's in agreement with me now. The other one doesn't, but I'm playing both anti-public small home dogs here, man. New Orleans Pelicans is the first one. The Nets are down from 2-1. 61% of the tickets on them, but 68% of the cash on the Pelicans. This line was 2 like a little while ago, so you still might be able to find 2. But if you want to take Pelicans +1, play the money line, whatever, I mean, I don't mind it. Like, I expect them to win this game. The one thing you do have to be aware of is injury issues, which Zion Williamson got injured again, and he is not going to be back in this game. So that's just one thing to be aware of here. But Trey Murphy, the third, will come back, it looks like, for the Pelicans. It looks like he's on track to come back in this game, and I think he has not played yet this season. And is that a big enough returning player that it's going to be a reverse injured player theory for the Pelicans? I don't actually think so. I think he's more of like kind of a role player, even though he is, I believe he is a starter once he gets in there, but I don't think he's big enough that it like impacts the line very much. I think it's just he's a good player and he's going to be back, and I think it should help the Pelicans having him back in the rotation without affecting the line and without affecting the chemistry that much. So he should be back in this game, so that may help the Pelicans a little bit, but this is also a spot play, and this is very much a play against the Brooklyn Nets. And of course, the public is actually on the Nets because they actually have a better record than New Orleans does right now. That's because New Orleans has been a very injured team, with Williamson being out a bunch of games so far this season, and McCollum hasn't played at all. Murphy hasn't played at all yet. So New Orleans may be starting to get a little bit healthier, hopefully for them, once Zion gets back. So they're not really as bad a team, and it's not like Brooklyn is that formidable a team. Brooklyn's coming off 2 huge step-up games, though, where they took the Celtics into overtime, and then they played close against Cleveland, only losing by 5. So how are they going to be able to continue this effort after 2 major step-up performances like that, where they lost both? I don't know that they're going to get back up off the mat after this. And after this, they have Boston again, and then the Knicks twice. So this is not only a game that they might overlook with New Orleans there, because New Orleans has a bad record, but New Orleans is also an out-of-conference team. So this game is surrounded by all these bigger Eastern Conference foes here for the Nets. So the Nets, they could run out of energy and maybe not have total focus on New Orleans here. This is a third game in 4 days, all in different cities. Even though, yes, arguably Brooklyn wants to salvage a game on the road trip, but still, how do you come off of 2 max effort games like that and put in another one here against a New Orleans team? I don't really see it, so I like New Orleans in this one. And New Orleans, they're coming off a game where they got absolutely blasted by an injured Orlando team. And though Orlando's still decent, but without Banchero, they're not as good. That was New Orleans, actually. That was their first game without Zion again. Zion has been hurt. Like, he's been in and out of the lineup, basically. He got hurt against Cleveland. And then New Orleans didn't have him in that last game. So you think, well, that should have been an injured player spot, but they really did not do well in that game going to Orlando. So I think New Orleans could be in a bounce-back spot here, man. I mean, after losing all these games in a row, they were coming off a pretty big game against Cleveland where they didn't perform that badly. I think it's a bounce-back spot here. If you get blown out by almost 30 points against anybody, you're going to be in a little bit of an angry mood, in my opinion. So I think New Orleans is going to show up for this one, try to get a win of some kind. And then my other game, as I mentioned already, is the San Antonio Spurs +1.5, or it looks like you can get +2 now, so you can get whatever the better numbers. This line's moved up on Sacramento from 1 to 2, but I don't agree with it. They are public with 75% of the tickets, but 98% of the cash on the Kings right now. Like I said, I do not agree with this, and maybe the market will start shifting. Maybe it could be a situation where maybe there are big money bettors even trying to set this line up to get the +2. I don't know, because 2 is a little bit of a key number in basketball because it's 1 bucket. I don't know, but if you're the Kings, look at this schedule, man. The Kings are playing a 3rd game in 4 days, a 4th game in 6 days, and actually it's a 5th game in 8 days, too, with most most of them in different cities. They had finished a road trip against Miami, 2 games at home against Toronto and the Clippers, and then back out on the road. So they've been kind of bouncing all over the place, man. This is a bad travel spot, bad rest spot. They're on a back-to-back. And what did they do last night? They went into Phoenix and beat them in overtime. And Phoenix was a one-loss team. And the Kings played a max effort game, man. Close game almost the whole way. Took them into overtime and won. So I think they're in a letdown spot. They have to turn around and play again. You have to go to San Antonio and play again immediately. And who do they have up next? Phoenix again in Minnesota. So this is a sun sandwich, man. This is Sacramento's in a binary star system now, man. And they are sandwiched in between both suns that are revolving around them. And they might be in trouble in this one, man. So I don't like the spot whatsoever for Sacramento here. This looks like a really, really difficult spot for them. And for San Antonio, I mean, this is also a situation where it's basically just pick the winner, and the public's going to come in and say, well, Sacramento has the better record, and they just beat Phoenix, so how can I not play Sacramento with a line that's basically just win the game? Well, not so fast. And San Antonio at least has yesterday off. They're not traveling, so they're staying at home. A way better travel spot for San Antonio. And what did they do in their last game? They lost to the Utah Jazz, who I think only had 1 win on the season. That is an ugly, ugly loss, man. And that was revenge for Utah because San Antonio had gone into Utah and beaten them pretty badly. So that was a nice road revenge scenario for Utah. It was a good spot for Utah to at least show up focused there, even though San Antonio wasn't in a particularly bad spot there either. But now I think San Antonio's in a spot where they're going to show up focused, man. You lose to a bad Utah Jazz team like that, I think you're going to be a little bit angry. You have a better Sacramento team coming into your place. I think you're going to show up focused for this one. I mean, this Sacramento team's pretty good, and you don't have anything bigger up next. Washington, it's not like that's going to draw any focus from San Antonio, I don't think. So I think San Antonio's in the much, much better spot. So give me the San Antonio Spurs +2 or +1.5, whatever's out there. Hockey, real quick, I'm only going to talk about one game, I think, in hockey, because this slate, there wasn't really a whole lot I was even really looking at on this slate. Even though, yeah, Carolina-Vegas is a big game. Carolina's up from -135 to -136 as a road favorite at Vegas. That's just how good Carolina is. They have 56% of the cash, 89% of the tickets on the other side of Vegas. So it looks like a public versus pros disparity there on the side of Carolina, with the pros coming in that way. Situationally, I looked at it, and I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but it's interesting that the odds makers are telling you Carolina is that good, that they're that much of a favorite on the road against Vegas. So I don't really know if the spot necessarily dictates it, but I'm looking at an over, and I'm going San Jose, Philadelphia over 6, and the best I could find is -118. It looks like it might be headed in the direction of 6.5 in this one, even though what we see here is that it's actually gone down with a little bit less juice, but that's not what I've seen in the market. And this is a type of game where the public isn't going to play an over in a hockey game between two teams that are this bad, San Jose and Philadelphia. The public's going to look at this and think, an over? Like, what are you talking about? Like, they're not going to play a total in this game at all, I wouldn't think. With two bad teams, the public perception tends to be these teams can't score. But remember that when you have two bad teams, it also kind of means that their defenses aren't really that good, and neither are their goalies. So, and I think this is a bad spot for both teams, which is why I'm coming in on the over here. Because originally I was like, oh, San Jose's in a bad spot. San Jose's been playing a little bit better recently too, and that might help as far as an over, even though they have not played a lot of over games recently. But look at the spot they're in now. They're in a back-to-back, and they just took advantage of a good spot, a bad spot for New Jersey. I mentioned it on my show yesterday. New Jersey was in a bad spot, and San Jose pulled off a massive upset. New Jersey was like a -330 favorite in that game, and San Jose shut them out. But again, remember, that was because New Jersey was in a terrible spot, in my opinion, sandwiched in at least between the Islanders and Florida. So it was at the very least a look-ahead spot. And it was a back-to-back, and they went with Allen in net, although that wasn't his fault that they lost that game. New Jersey's offense was just a total no-show in that game. So I was going to look to say, hey, maybe we should go against San Jose because they'd be in a letdown spot here. But then looking at their opponent in Philadelphia, they're not in a good spot either. They're returning home from a road trip that took them to the Pacific Coast. It didn't take them to the Pacific Coast. Excuse me. It took them down the Atlantic coast, but they had to play Carolina, Tampa, and Florida. I mean, that's a difficult road trip, man. And they're coming out of that road trip, and they played Tampa into a shootout and won. They only lost by 2 to Carolina, and they played a shootout against Florida, too. So at least for them, 2 of those 3 games went over. And Philadelphia, I mean, their goaltending situation is a mess with Urson, Fedotov, Kolosov all in the mix. I don't even know if it matters which goalie's going to be in net. I don't know which one it's going to be. Like I said, I don't know that it matters because I don't think any of these guys have been playing particularly well here. But I think Philadelphia's in a bad spot, too, coming off those huge games against Tampa and Florida. Having to return home from the road trip with only 1 day off. That's a typically distracted spot. They might not have that much focus against San Jose, even though Philadelphia does need wins here. San Jose is still one of the weaker teams in hockey here. So you got 2 weak teams going up against each other, and they're in bad spots. I think, to me, it means that the defensive intensity may not be there in this game. So that's why I like the over, man. As bad as these offenses might be, when you have teams that may not show up defensively, that can help the offenses. And I think the goaltenders could both be gotten to in this game as well. So that's going to be an over in San Jose and Philadelphia. Over 6. It's one of my hockey overs, which my leans have been pretty good in hockey so far. But to the over, but I'm only 1-1 and actually playing them. What's up, Thomas? Stroud over passing cash. Miami in a teaser. No, I like Miami in this game tonight. I'm about to talk about that right now. I agree with Miami in the teaser. If you were able to push that number up from, well, you probably were, because the line's always been between 1.5 and 2.5, right? So as long as you got that number up to 7.5, 8, or 8.5, I like that as a teaser leg, even though I think the game's going to be higher scoring. So I tend to like, when you push a leg of a teaser up like to above 7, I tend to like it better if it's going to be a lower scoring game, and I don't think this game is going to be, but I still don't disagree with Miami as a teaser leg because I like Miami to win the game anyway, so I don't mind that. Flacco, yeah, fuck him. I forgot to even mention that. So, yeah, my other NFL plays, I won on the New Orleans Saints, which I thought that was the strongest play of the week, as I mentioned, and Colts, I thought it was a good spot to play against Buffalo, man. It was one of those spots where it looked like Buffalo wouldn't show up for once, and I don't know that they actually even did, but the Colts just shot themselves in the foot repeatedly in that game. I would have to go back and look at the box score, but that sucked, dude. I thought the Colts would at least cover that game, and they only lost by 10, so it wasn't like they got absolutely annihilated. Urson was good against Florida last outing. Yeah, but then again, that means that he himself is going to be in a letdown spot. I don't know if he's playing in this game or if they're going to rest him, but if he played such a great game against Florida, even though that game wound up going into a shootout and was still a game that went over the total, he may not have total focus against this San Jose team here. So I like the over in that one. Let's talk about NFL. Hopefully I can get this done quick before I get out of here. As we know, this is Miami against the Rams. I already talked about this on my football weekly video, so you can go back and look at that. The Rams were -3 at some point, but that was on the look-ahead line, I think. Although it looks like it's headed back towards 3, so you might actually be able to get +3 on the Dolphins. But it's been 2.5 most of the week. It was actually 2.5, then it was down to 1.5, and now it's back up to 2.5, teetering on 3. So we've seen market like kind of roller coastering around and zigzagging around, but I like the Dolphins. I think the Rams are too public in this game. 68% of the tickets and only 58% of the cash. I just think that the Rams, after that like big primetime win over the Vikings, winning again in the game against Seattle last week, I think the public is on board with the Rams again. The Rams have Cooper Kupp back. I think Nakua came back, but he's hurt again. So I think Nakua is actually out again, but the public is still liking the Rams, man, with a bunch of their offense back, with Cooper Kupp being back there, and the way the Rams have looked so far. But the public is still, I think, not giving the Dolphins credit because they're still looking at this Dolphins team. But again, I think with both the total and the line in this game, I think they're taking into account how the Dolphins played without Tua way too much here, man, because Tua is back, and Miami has been way better offensively with Tua. I mean, they at least won the game against Jacksonville, even though that was the season opener, and they didn't play that great. So, I don't know. I mean, you can just throw that game out a little bit. Their offense played well in this game against Buffalo, even though it doesn't show on the scoreboard. They had like 300-something yards of offense, so that was not a bad offensive game. Tua got hurt towards the end of this game, and there were a lot of turnovers. I mean, he had 3 interceptions in the game, so that's why they lost that game, really. Miami outgained Buffalo significantly in that game. game was not what the final score would lead you to believe. And then Tua was out for all these games. Seattle, Tennessee, New England. Tua didn't come back until this game against Arizona, and immediately you see Miami's offense got way better with Tua in there as they were scoring. Look at how little they were scoring without him. 3, 12, 15, 10. Tua comes back, they score 27 in both games. So this offense is completely different with Tua there. And like I said, I think the total and the line are just both they're not like adjusting enough for that being the case for Tua being back. They're downgrading Miami too much for how bad they've been playing and the fact that Miami hasn't won yet with Tua back. But remember, the first game back, that was the injured player theory spot. So sometimes you expect them to it takes them a little while to get back into rhythm. And Miami was winning that game by 9 in the fourth quarter, so they probably should have won that game. Then they went to Buffalo. And do you really expect them to win outright against Buffalo? I mean, I wanted them to because they would have given me the money line cash there. Buffalo wound up having to win the game on a late, ridiculously long 61-yard field goal by Bass. Otherwise, that game was going into OT. So Miami played well in that game too. They covered for me and lost. So you might argue, well, that means Miami's going to be in a bad spot, right? Because they're coming off Buffalo, which is a huge step-up game for Miami. Now they have to go to the Pacific Coast and play a night game, which is going to be late by their biological clock. And I agree, it's not like the greatest spot for Miami here, but they need a win badly, however they can get it. So I don't necessarily know that they're going to completely show up unfocused here, but I agree it is a spot where they might be fatigued for those reasons I just mentioned, which is why I'm not actually going to play Miami in this one, but I still agree with the Miami side because I think the Rams are in better shape right now, sitting at 4-4. They've looked too good recently, almost coming off these wins here. Coming out of the bye, Sean McVay is a really good coach, man, and they made adjustments coming out of that bye. They got Cup back. They had Nakua back for this mix here. I told you they had that huge win over Minnesota, but that was a horrible spot for Minnesota. A short week on a Thursday, having to go out to the Pacific Coast immediately after playing the Detroit Lions and suffering their first loss. That game was an awful spot for Minnesota. I took advantage of it and played the Rams in that one. So that win maybe isn't as good as maybe it looked. And then the Rams looked good again last week. But again, this is a close game, man. That could have gone either way. And Seattle actually outplayed the Rams in this game and shot themselves in the foot with 3 turnovers, man, because Seattle outgained them by almost 80 yards in the game. So that was a better game, and it went into overtime. That was a better game for Seattle than it looked. So both of these wins for the Rams are slightly misleading, but the public's going to like it. And that's a big win for the Rams, man. That's a big divisional win for the Rams. So I think they're also not really in the greatest spot, even though at least for them, they're staying in the Pacific time zone. But that's why I like the over in this one, man. I mean, the Rams' defense has been pretty bad this year. The total's down from 49.5 to 49, juiced to the under. But we do see 74% of tickets and now 79% of the cash on the under. So even though the early movement kind of knocked the number down, we do see the cash appearing to be coming in on the over now, coming in on that. And that's the way I prefer to play this game rather than the side, because I think both defenses could be a little bit tired in the situations that these teams are in. And the Rams' defense isn't good anyway. The only thing good about the Rams' defense is that they can blitz. Their pass coverage is awful. Their run defense is not very good. So I think Miami's going to be able to establish the run in this game. Tua should be able to throw on this Rams' defense. He's not that bad at throwing when blitzed as well because he can move around with his legs. The only issue is that the Rams run a lot of cover 3, and Tua's not that good against cover 3. But other than that, I think this Miami offense should be able to do stuff against this Rams defense that really is one of the weaker defenses in the NFL. It's not good. And, of course, we know Miami's defense isn't very good either, so the Rams offense should be able to put up points as well in this game. So that's how I prefer to play it. That's going to do it for me, man. I'm Tower Gang Toad. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. Tower Gang, Patreon.com/Tower Gang. You get live pre-show, post-show, all the bonus content you want, baby. And that's going to do it. Once again, all those plays I have: college basketball, Florida minus 23.5, Chattanooga minus 2.5, NBA, Pelicans +2, Spurs +2, probably +2 or 1.5, whatever's out there. And NHL, San Jose, Philadelphia, over 6, minus 118. Rich, I apologize. Hopefully you can go back and watch it, but I got to peace out here. Have a good one, everybody. Let's have a winning day today. I got a lot of plays here, 5 plays. I want to at least go 3-2. Please, baby, let's do it. Peace out, guys. Thanks for hanging out.